Hello everyone, my name is Bilikis. How you all doing? You're welcome. Today's tutorial will be on how to make a MAXI A-line skirt. It is a special request from a loyal fan. So today's tutorial again will be on how to make a MAXI A-line skirt. I'll be making use of this material. So what are the necessary measurements we will need? So I just make a quick sketch just for you to get the concept. First, we will need the vertical measurement, that is along the body. The length of my skirt is 44 inches. Then the waist to the hip, this is from the waist to the hip here. For me, it is 8 inches. Then the band height will be 1 inch. That totally depends on your preference. Now to the horizontal measurement, that is circumference around your body. First, we need the waist. But I will be using my hip measurement for the waist. Why? Because the band will have an elastic and it has to slide through your hip upward. So that is why I'm using my hip measurement for my waist measurement. So now for my hip measurement, it is 44 inches. Then I will divide it by 4 because remember, it's always on fold when we are drafting. So I'll divide this now by 4. So what do I have? I will have 11. I have 11 inches. So the next thing now is this. You just want some ease around it. So the next thing I will do now is to add half an inch. Half an inch to it is, let me put it ease. Half an inch is. So it will just, give it a little space around. So what I'll have now here will be 11 and half. So I'll be making use of 11 and half inches on fold. So right now, let's go over to the hip measurement. My hip measurement still remains 44 inches. So when I divide that by 4, I will have 11 inches. So what I will do here now is to add ease of 1.5 inches. You could do up to 2 and you could just leave it at 1. But I'll just add 1.5 to mine. So 11 inches now plus 1.5, which is also 1.5 inches. So what I will have now will be 11 plus 1.5. That will give me 12 and half. 12 and half. The next measurement now will be the hem of the skirt, meaning this area, the hem of the skirt. So what would I do? I will now make use of the new hip measurements. This is the new hip measurement. 12 and half. 12 and half inches plus 6 inches to 10. That totally depends on the amount of fabric, determines that too. So that will be plus 6 inches to 10 inches. So you could make it 6, 7, 8, 9 or 10. So that totally depends on you. So let's assume I just want to make mine 7 or 8. So it will be 12 and half plus 8 inches. Can you see that? So that will give me 20 and half. So I could just round it off to 20 inches. It's actually 20 and half, but I'll just round it up to 20. So that totally depends on you. Right now, let's go over to drafts. Now my fabric is on fold. Can you see? In layers. So the fold is in 4. This is the lower part. So I'll start measuring from beneath upward. So that will make it easier for me. So I will measure from here upward. Now I'm going to start measuring from the lower part. Remember I said the length of my skirt is 44 inches. But I need a band height of 1 inch. But I'll just leave it at 44. Why? Because I will need some allowance to hem at the lower part and also at the upper part. So this is the 44. If you are adding any other allowance, you could just add it. Maybe you want it to be 45. You place it here. So I will just maintain that 44. Then I will just mark it upward, and then the head will be my baseline. So here now will be the baseline. Can you see that? Just make that into a straight line. So now this is where all our measurements will start from. So what I'll do now is to measure out for the horizontal measurement from my waist down to my hip. Remember, we are taking off 1 inch for the band. So now it will become 7. 7 is here. I'll come over here, measure 7. then draw it into a straight line. So this is the waist, the hip, and then the length of the skirt. Remember I said for the waist we'll be using a hip measurement, and then from the division we made, I'm going to show you the calculations. This is the calculation we made. So now for the waist we'll be making use of 11.5, while for the hip we make use of 12.5. So now I will place 11.5 here, 11.5 here, then 1 inch for the side seam allowance. So this same measurement that you have here will be what you use to cut out your band. So for the hip, 12.5. For this you could even make it more. Instead of 12.5, I could make it 13.5. That totally depends on how wide you want it to be. So this is 12.5 here, then 1 inch for the side seam allowance. So before we move to the lower part, I'll just connect this up. So my hip curve, this is the actual measurement. Can you see that? Then the seam allowance. Can you see that? So the next thing now is to move my fabric upward so that we can connect this down to the edge. So looking at it now, this is the line for the waist, the hip. So the next thing now is for us to connect from this hip down to the hem of the skirt, which I will show you how to do. Now I will now connect from this hip line down to the hem line. Remember for the hem line we said a new hip measurement plus between 6 to 10, but I eventually got my calculation to 20. I rounded it up to 20. So 20 is here. Can you see that? So the next thing now is for me to connect from this point down to this point with my ruler. So now I connected it with 2 rulers, but very soon this is going to end because our 1 meter wooden ruler is loading very soon. But I'll let you know when it is available. Let me see that. So I just connect the straight line. I want the chop through is so obvious. So this is what I have. Can you see the straight line? This is our A line skirt. So the next thing I'll do now is to come up by 2 inches or 1.5 here. So I'll take my measuring tape and just come up by 2 inches. Can you see that? And then use my hip curve to connect it to the hem of the skirt. So this is what I have. So the next thing now for me is to cut. What I will do now is to pull it down. Let me see that. So this is where we are. The sewing tools are very much available. The hip curve, the pan curve, the hammer curve, if you are interested. I didn't get this part well, so I have to trim it up. So this is what the skirt looks like. Can you see that? Can you see that? So now let's go to the band. So right now, before I cut the band with my leftover fabric, you have to confirm the measurement you have here. Although I should have 12.5 because my hip measurement was 11.5, then 1 inch plus side seam allowance, so that makes it 12.5. half. So I have to confirm in case yours is wider or shorter, so because your band has to be exact measurement. So let me just check. So here I still have my 12.5. So this is the same measurement I will use to cut my band. Then before I go over to the band, I just still like to just take 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch from the front panel of my skirt. So what I will just do is this 3/4 inch from the front panel, then use my hip cuff to connect it to the edge. So now I will be cutting this off only for the front panel. So now let me just remove this back panel. So now I only have the front panel. So let me just trim off this. So now it's time to cut the band. Right now I have my band cut out. I just have this on fold. Remember our fabric we cut out was on 4 fold, but this was on 2 fold. And my waist measurement there was 12.5 with terminal allowance inclusive. So all you have to do is to double it because we are having just 2 fold here and I have 25. So now on fold here I have 25. Can you see that? So 1 inch now will be for the sewing allowance. We will have to sew that. Then for the height, I'm using an elastic band of 1 inch. Can you see that? So if you double that, that will be 2 inches because remember it will be on fold. But you still want some spaces to be around your elastic rubber. Like, okay, instead of making it just 2, I'll just make it like 2.5 just to ease the space around the elastic. So you can either make it 1/2 inch or 3/4. So I added to mine. Then remember you need 1/2 inch on both sides to sew this together. So all that gave me 3.5. So here I have 3.5. You could even make it 3.75. That totally depends on you. Now the fabric I'm working with is very, very light. So what I will do now is to use this interfacing to just make it a little bit stiff. It is not hard, please. It's like the lightest. So I will do what? I will have to glue this to my fabric just to make it stiff. Then I'll show you how it looks. Now I've added the fusing to the band. Can you see? So it makes it more stable. So the next thing was that I just folded it this way. So I will be sewing 1/2 inch to the main band, then covering it up with this. So this will be the casing for the elastic. Then how do you determine the amount of elastic you will need for the skirt? All you have to do is take away 2 inches from your actual waist measurement. For the skirt, we made use of our hip measurement. But for the elastic, you will use your actual waist measurement. Like my waist measurement is 36. So when I take away 2 from that, I will have 34. So this elastic is 34 inches. So what I'll do now is this. Can you see? I've just folded in 1/2 inch. I should do the same to this. But before then, the next thing now is for me to sew. Can you see the band? So this is it now on the wrong side. I'm going to open all this up, although the crease will still be there for me. Then remember, we also added the 1 inch seam allowance we added to the main skirt. So I'll take to my sewing machine now and sew in the 1 inch. I'll have to sew in the 1 inch. Then I'll have to do this. This is the skirt, this is the waist side, and this is the hem of the skirt. So what I'll do now is to take in the seam allowance. You will sew on the wrong side. So now from the waist, I'll just have to sew 1 inch through the hip down to the hem of the skirt. Let me see that before attaching our band to it. The sides of my skirt has been taken in, so this is it. So now I have a full skirt. Then for the band, I've taken in the seam allowance, press it open, and then leave that in. So the next thing now is this. What I'll do is this. Take this. This is the right side. Then I'll sew to the main skirt on the wrong side. So this is what I will do. Can you see this? And I'll just place it here. Can you see that? Can you see the way I place it? This is the right side and this is the wrong side of the fabric. Then I'll pin it down. Then I'll pin it down all through. Because after sewing this will have to cover this hole on the right side before putting in the elastic. So can you see? So the next thing is to start pinning it all through. So now this is the last stage. So everything matches. So if there is a shortage or more, that means you must have taken in too much of your allowance or less than it. But looking at this, everything matches up with the main skirt. Can you see that? Can you see it? So now I'll take to the sewing machine and sew all through before covering it up. After doing that, then this will now cover this up to put in the elastic. Can you see? I've taken in the same allowance for my elastic. This is what it looks like. So let me just finish this on the sewing machine. Now I've sewn the band to the main fabric. So this is what it looks like. So when I bring this out, so this is the wrong side, while this is the right side. So what do I do now? I have to start sewing this. All the seam allowance go inward. Then I'll start doing it this way. You can also pin it down all through. Can you see what it looks like on the wrong side and on the right side? So I'll start sewing in 1/16 of an inch or even 1/8. That totally depends on you. Then I'll sew it all around, leaving an inch opening for the elastic. So looking at it, you will see I've sewn my elastic. This method, I usually use this method. After closing it up this way, so what I'll just do is this, just put this inward. This is it. So this will be like this. Can you see that? Then I'll now have to cover up the band. Then I'll start sewing. So I'll keep sewing it, then keep pulling. By the time I get closer, I pull it here. So then I keep sewing, then have all my elastic intact. That is another method I usually use because it is faster. Or better still, just sew it all round, then leave 1 inch opening. Then, but this won't be closed. Then I'll now have to pass through the elastic. So it depends on whichever method you want to use. Now I want to start sewing with the method I told you about. So what I'll do now is to put this elastic in it, then cover this up. Can you see this? So then I will put this under the machine, then the needle will be in it, then I'll keep sewing. Can you see? So when I get here, then I keep pulling the elastic. So let me just put this under the sewing machine for you to see. Looking at it now, my needle is in the fabric. So look at it. So make sure the seam allowance are inward, and I'll place it to cover the seam allowance. Then I will start sewing. Just go gently. Then you can always use your hand to feel the elastic band. So this is how I keep sewing. When I get here, I cover it up again and keep sewing. Can you see that? So it's faster and you just like that method, you keep using that. So I'll just keep rotating it. Can you see that? Cover it up again. Can you see? So that's how I keep sewing it, adjusting the band, making sure the seam allowance are inward. Then I keep sewing. Right now we are done with the A-line maxi skirt. You can see it's so easy to make. I just had to put it on the mannequin for you to have a quick glimpse of it. Hope you like it. If you like my video, make sure you give me a thumbs up, subscribe, tell your friends about it, and share my video. Bye. I remain your girl, Bilikis. Bye bye.
I love you.
That's the voice of my son.